Society rests on a delicate agreement. We follow the rules, respect the laws, and uphold moral boundaries. But all of that polite agreement vanishes the second a population looks at an empty plate and realizes no food is coming. Take 19th century Britain. Horses built the cities. They were companions, workers, almost part of the family. The very idea of slaughtering them for dinner was an atrocity that crossed every line of decency. But starvation has no use for decency. When working horses collapsed dead on the cobblestones, they rarely stayed there. Desperate citizens quietly dragged them away, butchered the meat, and ground it down to be sold in underground meat pies and cheap sausages. People ate it knowing exactly what it was. Because when you are trapped in crushing poverty, morals are a luxury you cannot afford to digest. You eat what is available. By the 1700s, that same desperation drove the starving masses to seek a different kind of survival. Millions turned to cheap, unlicensed gin. It was highly toxic, cut with dangerous chemicals, and aggressively addictive. But it offered a fast, cheap psychological escape from the misery of the slums. Meanwhile, the pristine rivers were full of large, calorie-dense swans. But these birds were protected royal property, reserved entirely for the elite. Yet hungry poachers repeatedly braved severe legal penalties and physical ruin just for the chance to steal a single forbidden meal. The government responded to both issues with the only tool it had: strict legislation. They passed heavy taxes on gin and cracked down on poaching. It didn't stop the drinking or the hunting. It simply pushed both activities deep into the violent, unregulated shadows. You cannot legislate away the physical ache of an empty stomach or the crushing mental weight of poverty. When the law stands between a desperate person and their only relief, the law always loses. The true horror sets in when that desperation infects the very core of human sustenance. Nothing is more vital or trusted than bread. This 3D diagram shows exactly what Victorian bakers were doing to inflate their yields during severe grain shortages. To keep the loaf looking full and white, while using a fraction of the actual flour, they packed the dough with cheap, heavy fillers like sawdust, construction chalk, and crushed bones. For the working class eating this every single day, it was a sentence of slow physical ruin. The heavy, indigestible minerals tore apart their digestive tracts, leaving them malnourished while technically feeling full. Avoiding bad bread meant finding other cheap calories. That meant turning a blind eye to where the meat came from. People began quietly buying up visibly diseased livestock that legal butchers rejected, or gathering shellfish straight out of heavily polluted, sewage-filled coastal waters. These contaminated scraps found their way into hidden, damp street stalls, masked by sizzling grease and heavy smoke. If you were starving, you didn't have the luxury of asking to see a health inspector's certificate. The people lining up at those stalls were entirely aware of what they were swallowing. They simply calculated that risking disease from tainted meat was a better option than guaranteed starvation. When you force a population to break the law just to eat and drink, you accidentally build a powerful underground community. The shared secret becomes a shared culture. The state slapped massive taxes on tea, pushing it completely out of reach for the average worker. So highly organized smuggling networks stepped in. Entire coastal villages banded together to hide the illegal shipments, protecting the smugglers from authorities, because having tea to drink meant preserving their dignity. The same rebellious spirit surrounded absinthe. Accused of causing hallucinations and madness, it was banned across Europe. But artists and writers intentionally sought it out in secret enclaves. The threat of the law actually gave the drink its allure. Or take the London eel pie. It was a cheap, working-class staple. When strict new health and zoning regulations threatened to wipe out the street vendors, many stall owners simply went off the grid. They kept serving their neighborhoods from hidden kitchens to ensure the community didn't lose its primary source of hot food. A state loses its authority the moment it tries to outlaw a population's core culture or its cheapest dinner. The people don't stop consuming, they just stop respecting the state. Eventually, the silent suffering in the shadows hits a breaking point, and the desperation spills into the streets. When grain prices spiked to impossible highs, the resulting bread riots were organized, violent seizures. Crowds overpowered the authorities, broke into the storehouses, and manually redistributed the flour themselves. Decades later, during the World Wars, The British government tried to prevent this chaos with strict rationing. They implemented a highly controlled system of coupons, registered shops, and mandatory queuing to ensure every citizen got an equal, albeit tiny, share. But the math of a ration book didn't always align with the reality of a starving child. Citizens immediately began cheating the system. They forged coupons, traded books on the sly, and lied to officials just to squeeze a few extra ounces of fat or sugar out of the state. A centralized system of control can look flawless on paper, but if it fails to put enough calories on the table, a hungry population will rip it apart from the inside out. These disparate acts, the forged coupons, the smuggled tea, the hidden meat stalls, coalesced into a pervasive shadow economy. Illegal trading shifted from a series of desperate exceptions into the primary method millions used to stay alive. While the legal supply chains faltered under wartime pressures and bureaucratic red tape, the illegal network thrived. The public placed their trust in smugglers and rogue butchers over government officials, for the simple reason that the criminals actually delivered the goods. Every interaction with diseased meat or forged coupons was a calculation of necessity. So, put your state fails to fill the plate. The threat of legal punishment loses its teeth against the immediate demand of a starving body. So put yourself in those damp cobblestone streets. If your family were starving and the rigid laws of the state offered you nothing but an empty plate, which of those rules would you break first?